Welcome to Hope and Healing with Terry. I'm your host, Terry Donahue. Everybody has a story, and your story matters. Whether your story is full of love and acceptance or marked by hurt and anger, you are welcome here. I work with women who have been through traumatic experiences either as an adult or during childhood. I try to love one another as Jesus commanded in John 13:34, so you won't find any judgment here. Join me as we explore hope, healing, and faith together. So today we're going to talk about um, the NICU. So, if you got to listen to episode 1 of the podcast, I shared my high risk pregnancy and having my son born 3 months premature. Um, so, now we're going to talk a little bit about after he was born and his life in the NICU. He spent his first 125 days in the NICU. So, I'm going to kind of just tell you a little bit about that. I'm going to teach you some new terms. So, after I had my son, I was told, depending upon how he's doing, I would get to see him. And when kids are in the NICU, when babies are in the NICU, they do not hold their body temperature like we do. And so he was put in what I like to call a Ziploc baggie because he was literally put in a little plastic bag and he was held up to me to see him for like very briefly, like for a few seconds. And then he was whisked away. And my husband followed him to the NICU while they finished up what they were doing with me and got me settled back into my room. Now, while everyone else is like waiting outside the NICU to see how he's doing, hoping they can get a glimpse of him, hoping they can go in and see him and all the things, which I don't believe anyone got to do that. My sister came and stayed with me. So I wasn't by myself, which was kind of nice, right? Um, but I did get to go see him the next day. I feel like everyone got to see him before me, but they really only got to see him pass through and they got to take a few pictures of him because our family and friends were told to wait outside the NICU waiting room and they would go past there to go inside the NICU. So they got to see him. Um, when I got to see him, I had been told they were going to move my room and put me in I think a bigger room or smaller. I honestly don't know, but I had a lot of visitors, so I kind of feel like maybe it was bigger. I don't remember. And so, when there's a baby in the NICU, they are in what they call an isolette. So an isolette, if you've ever seen the like enclosed baby bed, that is an isolette and it has like little portholes. That is there. So what that isolette does is it's kind of mimicking the womb for babies born premature. And it like controls the humidity, the heat, and all the things in there. It actually has a weight so you can weigh the baby on the bed. So pretty much anything they can eat. Now, it was funny because I would share pictures of my son and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, he's so much bigger than I thought." He really wasn't. Everything for the isolette is made for the size of premature babies. So it would look like he's on this giant bed or something, and he's not. He's on a little bed just like him. So that's kind of a little bit about that. So the first time I got to go see him, my husband wheeled me down there, and I was still on a lot of magnesium on medication, and the magnesium would make me like just go to sleep and make weird noises. Like I would wake myself up making weird noises. And in my room, I could hear people talking all around me, but I could not actually open my eyes or wake up. So there was, a lot going on there. So when I got to go see him, when you have a baby in the NICU, you get to do what they call cupping. Okay. So cupping is where you get to put one hand on their little tiny head, okay, and you can literally hold their head, and the other hand on their little feet. So you're holding them like this. You're basically cupping them. And so that is how I was able to see my son. So you put your hands in the little portholes and you can touch them that way. Now, my son did not tolerate noise. He did not tolerate touch. He did not tolerate anything. And so we didn't really get to do that a lot. He had hands on every 3 hours. So every 3 hours, a nurse comes in there, and that's when they check the baby's temperature. That is when they change the diaper, or you get to, at some point, you get to do that. And anything that the baby needs is done at that time. So if they need a blood gas or if they need um, anything, that's when it's happening. If they need nutrition, that's when it's happening. Now, my son didn't get to eat for the first 3.5 weeks. He just got like fluids. He didn't get actual nutrition. So, which was kind of good because if you have an emergency C-section, it can take a while for your milk to come in. And so that helped me be ahead of him. So that's kind of nice. Okay. So, in speaking of that, when you when you first have a baby, the first bit of milk that comes out, they call it liquid gold. It's colostrum. What that is it has a lot of antibodies in it. It has minerals, it has vitamins, and it's all things coming from your mom to the baby. And it kind of helps build their immune system and do things like that. So even people who do not plan to breastfeed or who cannot breastfeed, they're encouraged to at least get that liquid gold. And I think you get it for like the first couple weeks. I honestly don't remember. Um, but I know it's a big deal. And even if it's like a drop or two, do not throw that out. Like take it to the NICU, give it to the baby, right? So that day when I got to go see my son and I'm cupping him, my husband later told me that I startled him because I'm in this wheelchair and I'm, half out of it, and I fell asleep and I made one of those weird noises that would wake me up. And when I did, he like jumped and I was like, okay. But I didn't know that because, you know, I'm drugged up, right? So my husband took me back to my room, and I don't really remember much from that. But a lactation nurse came in, and she got me hooked up to a pump. I don't even know what's going on, y'all. And she's got me hooked up to a pump. Um, for that tiny bit of liquid gold that my husband then runs up to the NICU. But he wasn't in the room when this happened. He was probably in the NICU with our son. So later, another lactation nurse came in and she was like, yeah, I was told that you were kind of out of it and maybe you would need help or have questions. I was like, yeah, because I don't really know what happened. And so she was able to kind of answer questions and help me, things like that. So that was kind of nice. Um, and the pump at the hospital is so good that when I came home, I was like, yeah, we're renting one of those pumps because you can't go from using that pump to another pump. It's just not the same. Okay. I like things fast. Okay. So anyway, so that's a little bit about that. My husband and I feel like the boot camp, NICU was a boot camp. Like we were there, our son was there for 125 days, so we got all the training that we needed before he came home because we're first time parents. We didn't know anything about a baby. And then you throw in this severely premature baby and we really don't know what we're doing, right? So they taught us everything that we needed to know to be able to take care of our baby. So that was kind of awesome. We also went to CPR classes, learned about third hand smoke. A lot of people don't know about third hand smoke. Babies that are like my son, his top three problems, as we were told, were lungs, lungs, lungs. And so lungs typically develop at 35 weeks. Well, our son was born at 27 weeks. And they would have thought he was a younger gestational age, but we did in vitro, so we know exactly when he was born. But his lungs were that bad. Like they were bad. Also, when babies are born premature, they have translucent skin. So you can kind of they look really dark, but you can kind of see it's very interesting. And there's like little hair on it, but that's translucent skin. He also had what I would call, we were told were cauliflower ears, because I remember at one point being like, will his ears always be like that? No, the cartilage was not developed yet, so his ears are kind of like down. So it was not, typical ears that we're used to, right? But even being so tiny, he had so much personality. Like he knew what he liked and what he didn't like. And it was so fun. I have so many videos from him from the NICU, which were really awesome. But he was born in the 47th percentile. So he's pretty big for his gestational age, which I already knew that. But then he dropped off the chart completely. Like he just kind of went down, down, down until he's not even on the percentile chart. So at one point, we were told he was a failure to thrive baby. And so, I'm pumping and getting him all the nutrition I can because I feel like that is literally the only thing I can do for my son. I cannot help take care of him. I cannot do anything for him, really. There's nurses that do it. I can't hold him. And so that was really all I could do. So when they had to come to me and tell me, hey, Terry, I know you're working hard and you're doing a great job, but we need to fortify his milk. He needs higher calories. And I was like, okay, am I doing something wrong? Because, as a mom, it's always our fault, right? So am I doing something wrong? Is there something I need to do better? Am I not eating good enough? Am I not drinking enough water? Like, what is going on here? And they're like, no, it's not you. It's just he needs more calories than you can give him. I was like, okay. So that was kind of hard for me, but you know what? He started growing, and for that, I have to be thankful, right? Um, let's see. But Oh, I forgot to tell you, in the NICU, because I got my notes, y'all. In the NICU, he is what is referred to as a wimpy white boy. If you have a white boy that was born in the NICU, you've probably heard the term, but white boys tend to do the worst in the NICU, and they have a term for that, wimpy white boy. Girls do better in the NICU. And so I'm sure if my son heard that today, he'd be like, no, because he's such a strong boy. But that is what it was in the NICU. They call little white boys that. So when he was born, a lot of people were scared. A lot of people acted like he would not make it. And I remember one morning I posted on social media that the NICU called us and we went down to the NICU. It was the first day I got to take a shower. So I was so excited. I got to take a shower. Life is good, right? Well, we got the call and we went down to the NICU. In the NICU, you cannot reach me. Your phones are off because of babies like mine. It can mess up the machines that they're on. And so we were not reachable after I posted and was like, hey, the NICU called us. So people are freaking out because they don't know why the NICU called us. They don't know what's going on. And basically, it was to talk about his ventilator. He was fine, but it really did scare people. And people really acted like he was going to die. And that would make me so angry because I knew in my heart that my son was going to be okay. I had no doubt. I knew that he was going to be okay. Like I felt like God told me he was going to be fine, and I believed it. So I had to have some conversations with people that were like, hey, he's fine. We literally just went down there because they called us. Like, it's no big deal. And so, I remember I got to stay in the hospital for a while, and the doctor like had me stay there a couple extra days. And then he was like, insurance will not let me hold you any longer, so you're going to be discharged. And I was told, go get your medications filled before you leave because the nurses will no longer hunt you down. So every day when I'm in the NICU, if it was time for me to take something, the nurses would literally hunt me down in the NICU for me to take whatever it was I needed. And I'm like, I don't need it. I'm fine, right? Because obviously if I needed it, I would come find you. But, they're trying to take care of us. And so we didn't do that. So they told me once I got discharged that I could keep my room for as long as I wanted. They wouldn't like kick me out of the room, but I wasn't a patient, so they couldn't do anything for me anymore. And I'm like, that's fine, whatever. Well, we did go home and take some stuff home, but y'all, leaving my baby was hard because it was one thing when I'm just like a floor away because the NICU was on a different floor than I was. It's a different thing when I'm about 40 minutes away. And then depending on traffic, it could be more. Okay. So that part sucked. But, we survived it, right? We're here now. And I also learned that we always saw a neonatologist there. That is the doctor that sees premature babies. We saw them there all the time. There was always one there. They were always like talking to us. They were always available. And I later learned they are there for the very sick and fragile babies. And the reason they were there so much when my son was born is because he was that sick and fragile baby. I learned that later when there was a new sick and fragile baby because we had finally reached a point where they weren't there all the time. And I did notice that they weren't there all the time. I was like, wow, they used to be here all the time. Like, what's going on? That's why when they have a baby like mine, somebody's there all the time. So, but when your baby's doing better because they are not there all the time. There's not someone there 24/7, and that's kind of nice. Um, Also, when our son was in the NICU, if you've ever been through anything, my cousin had a son that went through cancer treatment. There's just a lot of things. People all don't always know how to respond. So some of the things that people said in the NICU to me were hurtful, and this would be family and friends, mostly family. They would say hurtful things because sometimes people want to make things about them, and it's not about them. It was 100% about this tiny little baby who was fighting to be here, fighting to live. And I remember when I saw my doctor, she said, a lot of people, parents, forget that the NICU is about their baby and they think it's about them. And I'm like, I don't think it's about me. I 100% think it's about my baby. Like, I literally only care how he's doing. They do not have to take care of me. They do not have to, they answer my questions, but it's not about me. Everything is about that little boy and helping him be healthy and strong so that someday he gets to come home, right? But it's hard. It's hard to have a child in the NICU. And I'm sure it's hard. I can only speak from my perspective, but I'm sure it's also hard for family and for friends because they can't always get a hold of you to ask questions and see how your baby's doing. And they don't always know. And our son, since he didn't tolerate noise and touch, we didn't allow visitors. And we were encouraged to be that way because it was bad for him. When he would have noise or anything like that, he would desat, which means he's not breathing. It's not good. And so that is something I feel like the longer he was there, the more people understood that. But people didn't understand that at first because that's not the norm. That's not what any of us are used to. We are used to being able to be like, oh, I've got a baby, we're coming to see it. And so a lot of our friends did not acknowledge that we had a baby. They did not come see us or call or check on us. I think they were scared. And so I get it. It was hurtful at the time. But then, of course, the ones who didn't always say the right thing. So that's just how it is, right? When you go through a tough situation, nobody knows how to respond. So, but he didn't tolerate any of that stuff. So it also affected who got to be in his room, like a roommate, because they have one roommate. And his first roommate I never met. She was a full-term baby and she cried. So she did not get to stay there. And since his room was across from the nurse's station, she's the one that got moved, not him. He stayed there. And so I never met her or her family. In fact, she was out of the NICU before I even came down there. So when I got there, I don't think he had a roommate. And then he did get a roommate 3 days later. And we still talk to that family because they're 3 days apart. We've known them most of his life, right? And we've known the other kid all his life. So that was kind of fun because we kind of, in the NICU, you kind of form a little family. I mean, most people outside of there don't understand what you're going through. They don't know what your day to day is. They don't know how much good news or bad news you get. But in the NICU, you're kind of in the safe bubble because we all understand what's going on. We all know that there's 2 steps back to every step forward. And so you kind of form this bond, plus you're spending so much time there and not spending time anywhere else. So that was kind of fun to get to know other families and stuff like that. But one of the things I will tell you is I learned very quickly who I would and would not talk to because I'm very friendly and I'm very outgoing and I talk to everybody. So I make friends easily, right? But I learned that people who had a child there for what I will call a short term baby, they were not as friendly as those who had a baby there long term. I understand that, but I'm going to explain it a little bit. When you have a baby like mine who is very fragile and very sick and who is not guaranteed to make it out of there or to thrive, um, you take everything as a blessing. You are so thankful for every minute. You're so thankful for every day, for every milestone that's hit. And it takes a long time to hit those milestones, y'all. But you're thankful for every single bit of it. People who have a baby born full term or almost term, who are just there for maybe the bilirubin's low, or maybe they're having a little bit of trouble breathing. They might need oxygen briefly. Or maybe I don't know, they're not eating well. There's several reasons why they could go there for a brief time. Well, they, to them, it's not normal. To me, it felt normal. To me, my son would not be alive without that NICU. And to other people, they were very angry, scared. I should say they're scared that their child is there. And I'm thankful that my child is there because it means I still have him. So I think that's why people respond differently. I even have a friend, and she told me one time, she was like, because I told her about my experience, and she told me, she had a baby there very briefly, and she was angry because this was not normal for her. It wasn't her first baby, and that's the other person I talked to when their first baby. So, they're scared. And it was hard for me to see that because I was just like, okay, I'm not going to talk to you. Like I walk off and go back to my little room bubble. But she was scared. And so my friend, she was scared too. She goes, but I didn't handle it well. She goes, I wasn't very friendly. And so, because it's not normal. But for someone like my son, I have a lot to be thankful for because without the NICU, he would not be here today. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit about that. So my son had his first surgery when he was just 2 weeks old. And the great thing about Mercy, by the way, if you're in the Oklahoma City area and you have a premature baby, I'm going to highly recommend Mercy to you because they are freaking fantastic. Like the angels at Mercy, that is what I call them, the nurses, the RTs, the doctors, the therapists, everyone who comes in and works with your baby is just phenomenal. Even the lady who would come in and clean the room each day and talk to the parents, I loved her too. Okay. So, I recommend them. And my doctor made sure that I had my son there, and I'm so, so thankful for that. But when you're at Mercy, they turn their little room into their own little surgical unit. So, like his roommate got booted out for the day, put in another room. They clean the room, scrub it down, make it ready. Everything comes to the baby. Everything is baby size for the little tiny preemie, and it's nice. So, his room that day stayed extremely quiet. I got to be in there with him, but they really worked hard to have no noise, nothing. Okay. In the NICU, it's kind of quiet except for you hear so many machines. So it's really not. Like if I go see someone now that has a baby in the NICU, I know all those sounds. Okay, I recognize them. And it's weird. Um, but they turned that his room into a little surgical unit, which is nice. And then the family gets to wait in the family room. We had some family come sit with us. That was honestly stressful for me because my little 2 week old tiny baby is in heart surgery and there are people planning for when he comes home. He was nowhere near coming home and we didn't even have a dream that he was. Like we are taking it sometimes minute by minute, other times hour by hour, and sometimes day by day. It's a long journey. I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. It's a long journey. And so to hear someone like planning him coming home, they don't know what he's going to need when he comes home. And it's also not your job. Okay. We have a whole medical team who is working with him. Okay. And then others are trying to like make the mood light and funny. And I just was not in that place. My tiny little baby is in heart surgery, for goodness sake. But, we all handle things differently. So looking back, I have a different view of it than I did that day. It was stressful to me that day. But now I'm like, okay, they all love him. They were there for him. So, but he had his first surgery and he did okay. He did great in the surgery, but then he got an infection on his incision. So he actually has an incision, or I'm sorry, a scar on his back. If people see it, that's what it is. It's a scar from his PDA. So a PDA is basically just, I don't know. He had a PDA done, which basically is a hole in the heart. So premature babies, it's not uncommon for them to have a hole in their heart, and typically it will close on its own, but they also give you medications to try to help it close. We were told what size a large one was, and then told his was larger than that. So after a few rounds of medications, they're like, Terry, we're gonna have to do the surgery. And then my husband and I are like, yes, do what you need to do, take care of our baby. So we approved that. But little babies, they are such fighters. Like he fought to be here, he fought to be alive, he fought in the NICU. Like they are little fighters. They are amazing kids. And that's all preemies, not just my son. I think all kids are like that. Even kids that are going through other things. I think kids are just so tough. Like they have such a zeal for life that it doesn't that's all they know is to just do what they got to do and fight to live. Whereas adults, I feel like sometimes people give up or sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, why am I going through this? I'm so done. And I don't think kids have the capacity to understand that, so they just go. Like he fought, right? But having a kid in the NICU is hard. I would take naps in the NICU in his room sometimes because, it's exhausting going from home to NICU and home to NICU and all of that. And my husband went back to work and because he wanted to save his time off for when our son came home, which I'm so glad that he did that. And so he would work all day and then come to the NICU when he got off. And I was there all day, every day, and he would come when he got off. And then we would typically go home about the same time. So, and before I could drive, my aunt was nice and she would take me up there so I could spend the day with our son. So, so thankful. We have so much family who is very supportive and very helpful for us when we were going through all of that, which Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful. Like I would come home and there would be food at my house or little gifts at my house. My yard was taken care of. Like I would cry over this now, right? But people did so many things to be helpful for us. And I know it was hard for all of us, not just, the parents, but grandparents, aunt and uncles. Like nobody knows what's happening, right? It's kind of scary, but anyway, so my due date was in July. My son was born 3 months premature. My baby shower was planned for May because we did expect our son to be born a little early, but by a little early, I meant like June. And so 3 months was a little earlier than anticipated. So it was kind of weird to go to my baby shower because I went to my baby shower without a baby. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. It was good, I guess. But I also had a June baby shower. That one didn't go as well, but that's okay too. I don't have very many pictures from my baby shower. Y'all, take pictures. Everybody take pictures. I don't know if you're about you, but I love pictures, so take pictures. So the NICU was very challenging because, like I said, you can take one step forward, but then you take two steps back. There were times that I just, it was hard. One of the nurses one time was like, "You're here to support everyone else," because I was there for all the other parents. Like, I don't know, I just naturally do that, right? She said, "Who's here for you?" And I said, "I guess you are." Because our family couldn't be in the NICU with us. So we have to have our own little NICU family. And so she would help us. But in the NICU, you see a lot of babies come and you see a lot of babies go. And babies like mine don't go. They just stay. And so like his first roommate, I'm still friends with all his roommates. Like I know what's going on with their kids. It's been fantastic. Like I love that. But not every baby that comes into the NICU gets to go home. Some of them do not get to go home. One of his last roommate, he was in the NICU for 9 months and 21 days, if I remember accurately, and he did not get to go home. His family did not get the good ending. Another baby that we were friends with the parents, their son had brittle bone syndrome. I believe it's OI, and he did not get to go home from the NICU either. So, we've been to some NICU funerals, some baby funerals. Those are terrible. It's like you're so thankful and happy that your baby got to come home and your baby overcame all these major challenges, but not every baby gets that. So, but you make friends in the NICU and you become like a little NICU family. And that's one of my great memories is all the friends that we made because we all understand each other and we're all going through similar situations, even though our babies were totally different. Um, there was another family that we were friends with, their baby also went through some significant challenges. And I believe their baby was in the NICU even longer than ours. So you just don't know. Some babies come and go, and some babies are there for a while. Um, so we have good stories, funny stories, scary stories, all the stories from the NICU. And I remember them telling us this is just going to be like a little blink in time. And I'm thinking, no, this is like our day every single day. You guys, my son is 14, and this is literally like a blink in time. It seems so far back and so small compared to all the other time that we've had with him. And I will tell you, after getting him home from the NICU, I probably spent a lot of time making up for the times I didn't get to hold him and the times I didn't get to take care of him because I like held onto my baby for as long as I could. He took naps in my lap. And so, but you do what you got to do. Okay. So most babies are home by their due date. So I assumed ours would be too, right? Because that's what we're told. Most babies are home by their due date. And I'm thinking, okay, great. And as his due date got closer, I was talking to one of the nurses, and she realized that nobody had told me that my baby would not be home by his due date. Because I just assumed, since most babies are, that he will be. And he was not one of those. He was not one due home by his due date. Now, most of the ones we know were, and that's awesome, fantastic, but not others. So we watched other babies come and go and thrive, and we got to help with his first roommate. Like the first time he got to wear clothes, we got to celebrate with them. The first time they got to help give him a bath, we got to celebrate. We took pictures. We got to celebrate him going home. And one of the awesome things about him going home, one of the things fun in the NICU is photo shoots. The nurses love to do photo shoots because, what else you can do? And my son was still pretty sick when her son went home. but we asked if we could get them together for a photo. And we got permission for her to bring her son into my son's room. He wasn't like he couldn't touch anything or, which he's a baby. What's he gonna touch? But she got to bring him in there. And then they actually let me get my son out and kind of hold him up. So we have pictures of them, which is pretty cool. And then one of the RTs is like, hold on, let me take his mask off. And so she was holding the oxygen to his nose between photos. And so she made it possible for us to get some photos where you could actually see him. So that was kind of nice too. So they do a lot of things. They work with us a lot. So let's see. Um, let's see. He had a brain bleed. That's pretty common, I think, in the NICU. Thankfully, his did finally start correcting it. He had a grade 3 out of 4. So thankfully it did start healing. Yay! One less thing he had to do, brain surgery, he did not have to do. He had ROP, which is retinopathy of prematurity. And that can cause some major disabilities for children. And he ended up having two laser eye surgeries to correct that. He still sees his eye specialist, but we're down to every 3 years, which is fantastic. He also expected that he would need glasses, and he never has. So that's pretty awesome too. In the NICU, oh my goodness. As babies get bigger, they start grabbing things. So he would extubate himself. He would take out his NG tube or his OG tube. So an NG tube is where you're getting nutrition through your nose. OG tube is where you're getting oral nutrition, so it's through your mouth. So he would pull at wires. He would use his head to extubate himself. So they had a little weight, a little tiny baby weight on his head to keep him from being able to do that. I was never in the room when he extubated himself, which I'm so thankful for because I watched another baby do it. You guys, that is terrifying. And I don't think his mom was there when it happened either. But they all come running in to start taking care of that baby, and you just kind of get out of the way so they can do what they need to do, right? But I was glad my son always chose after I left to do something like that because it's scary. But he would desat pretty low, and that was scary. There were a couple times where I was there and they had him bagged, which just means that they have a tube and they're breathing for him. So that's pretty scary. So you see a lot of things. So the first time I got to hold my son, he was almost a month old. And I had been told several times, hey, Terry, he's doing good. You're going to get to hold him soon. And then I wouldn't get to hold him. So one night, I want to say it was a Sunday night, but I honestly don't know. We were told, hey, when you come in tomorrow, you're going to get to hold him. And I was like, hey. And so I came in the next day excited, thinking I'm holding my son. And I was like, I'm going to go pump. So I went to the lactation room, and the doctor was like, we're going to do a blood gas. And so I come back and find out the blood gas was not good. So the blood gas, what they do is they do a heel stick. So they take the little tiny heel of the baby and they stick it to get a little bit of blood. And then that tells them like CO2 levels and all the different things that they need to know. So they know oxygen, all this stuff. And since his wasn't good, she said, I'm sorry, you're not going to get to hold him. And I was like, it's okay. I mean, I was upset, but I said, it's okay. I want whatever is best for him. And if it's not good for him, then, it's okay. Well, I decided to kind of leave the hospital for a little bit. We were having some work done on our house. We were getting new windows. And my father-in-law was there to help with that, but I forgot to leave money. So I was like, I'll just run to the credit union, get money, whatever. As I pull up to the credit union, and I cried, y'all. I cried because I did want what was best for my son, but I also wanted to hold him. I had not held him yet, and he was almost a month old. Like literally a few days shy of being a month old. And so I get to the credit union and this song played, What Faith Can Do by Cutlass. And I heard this song play, and I'm sure anyone walking past my car was like, what is wrong with that person? Because I was bawling because impossible is not a word. And I don't even remember the lyrics of the song now, which if it's playing, I can totally sing it. But it played, and it reminded me that I have faith and it's going to be okay. And I may not get to hold my baby today, but I will hold my baby. And it will be good, and he will be okay with that. So I get back to the hospital that day, And, you know, I hang out, and then my husband gets there, and night shift comes in. And RT, I won't name any names, and nurse come in, and they're like, "Hey, we heard what happened today, and I'm so sorry." I'm like, "You know, it's okay. Like, I want whatever's best for him, and if it's not okay for him, we'll wait." And they're like, "No, your baby needs you, and you need him." So they closed the blinds. Oh my gosh, y'all, I'm gonna cry. They closed the blinds, and while they changed his isolate, all of his bedding, I held my baby for the very first time. And since he was still on a ventilator, there was a lot of work that went into that. So they had to kind of tape some stuff to the chair, and I had to get where I could hold him. And he tolerated holding me for 20 amazing minutes. He had to hold my baby for 20 minutes. And you guys, it was a fantastic, awesome feeling to finally hold my little tiny baby. But after 20 minutes, he didn't tolerate that anymore. And that's okay. I needed that, and he needed that, and it was great. And then I didn't get to hold him again for a while, and that's okay because I got those 20 minutes. And so my first Mother's Day was not awesome. I shouldn't say it's not awesome because I'm so thankful I had my baby, but it really sucked to sit and look at him in his little isolette and not get to hold him and not really get to be a part of his care, you should say. I mean, I could cup him a little bit, maybe change a diaper, but I couldn't really take care of him, right? And so we also went to church that day because I'm like, we're going to go to church. It's Mother's Day. That was a mistake. Having your baby in the NICU on Mother's Day and going to church where mothers are being celebrated and all these people with their little tiny babies are up there, that that was hard because as happy as I am for everybody, and I know people who've never gotten that opportunity, and of course we know people who've lost their baby, um, I felt guilty that I was sad for not being able to like interact with my baby and hold him. But I got to spend the day with him, and so you know, there's that. So that was pretty awesome. So and then shortly after Mother's Day, I did get to hold him again. It was kind of it wasn't an everyday thing, and there was a lot of work that went into it. And when we did get to start holding him, it was a while before I let my husband hold him because every time we could hold him, I was like, I'm taking him. I'm holding him. So Daddy had to wait a little bit. So during the NICU stay, because May in Oklahoma is storm season, we had some storm things happen. A tornado on the ground near the NICU, code black, thunderstorms, hail, all the things. And I remember one time I was told I had to go down to the basement, and my son is like on like the top floor. And they're like, you have to go down to the basement. I was like, I am not leaving my baby. Like, I'm fine. He can't leave. And so the nurses were like, Terry, he is safe. He is in his little isolate. Like he is safer than we are. And I wouldn't leave. So they're like, fine, stand in the hall. They wouldn't let me be in his room because you know there's windows all around. They're like, you can stand in the hall, but you cannot be in the room. I said, okay. So I stood in the hall and just stared at him, right? And thankfully, our hospital was fine. Nobody got hurt. There was a window broken in the NICU, and I knew the family that was in that room, and but everyone was fine. Everything was okay, and I'm very thankful for that. But yes, I learned what a code black is, and it's not good. It means a storm is upon us. And another family that was there that we got to meet, got to know really well. They were living in a trailer, I guess a travel trailer in the parking lot. Well, hell destroyed that. They ended up staying at our house because they didn't live close. So they ended up staying at our house. So we kind of, you know, added to the family, I guess you could say. We still talk to them all the time too. And our kids have met each other and stuff like that. But they didn't live here. So that was kind of nice. But I'm like, we come here every single day. So yeah, you can stay with them. They didn't have a car or anything. So they were young. So that was kind of nice, I guess, because again, we understood each other. One of the things for my son, since lungs were his big problem, he was on steroids for a long time. And steroids can cause developmental delays, but at the time, you choose life over death, and we definitely agreed to the steroids. Every time they tried to take him off of them, it didn't go well and he ended up back on them. In fact, he left the NICU on steroids and they really don't like that, but sometimes you do what you have to do. Um, when it was time for my son to leave the NICU, they were like, Terry, he's really only here for medication. And we feel like you are qualified to do that. How do you feel? And I was like, oh, I'm 100% qualified to do that. Yeah, I mean, I've been living the NICU boot camp life for 125 days, so I felt prepared. Um, when it came time for my baby shower, it was really weird to go to my baby shower without my baby. I didn't have a baby bump. I didn't have a baby. I just got to go like celebrate and open gifts, right? But the friend that was staying with us, she came with me. I thought that was really nice. So both of us got out of the hospital for a little bit, and Dad stayed in the NICU with our babies. And so it was kind of fun. It was fun to have. It was nice to have someone who understood how hard it was to be there without my baby or without my baby bump, because having your baby shower planned for May when your baby's due in July should be ample time, right? But it wasn't. So it is what it is. But at some point, my son got to finally get off the ventilator. The doctor was like, hey, let's just give him a chance, see how he does on CPAP. We were going to do it the next day. Well, he chose to extubate himself at about 3 a.m. and they went ahead and moved him to CPAP before I got there. He didn't do awesome on CPAP, but they tried a different machine called CPAP, and he did pretty good on CPAP. He had also been on an oscillator for a long time, so he went through a few different machines to help him breathe. And then I remember when he finally got to wear clothes. That's a big milestone in the NICU. So the milestones that most parents are excited about are different than what we celebrate in the NICU. So when he got to wear clothes, we're like, yay, he got to wear clothes. So that was kind of nice. Oh, and then there's finally the time when we got to help give him a bath. Like those are huge milestones. Those are scary because when you have babies that are fragile and sick like that, it's kind of scary to do that stuff, but oh my gosh, it means so much to families to be able, for me, right, to be able to do that. So that was pretty cool. And then finally the day comes where Daddy gets to hold Britt. And the first time I got to hold him, he tolerated about 20 minutes. And I think the most he ever tolerated holding me was an hour. And then when Daddy gets to hold him, I'm ADHD, y'all. I have trouble sitting still. And I mean, you might notice that I move around while I'm doing this, but I have trouble sitting still. So Dad, my husband was like, he probably feels like he's on a roller coaster ride with you because I can't sit still. He held him for 3.5 hours, and the child tolerated Daddy holding him for 3.5 hours. Now, there was one point where my husband hiccuped and our poor little baby like blew up and back down. I was like, oh, but yeah, so I think that's really good. So, but there were still a lot of bad days and there were a lot of good days. So on those bad days, we didn't get to hold him. On those days where he would desat a lot, we didn't get to hold him. On those days where they tried to take him off steroids, didn't get to hold him. The NICU was hard. I'm not even going to tell you it wasn't because it is. If you've ever been through it or know someone that has, you know that it is. There's a lot of good, but there's also a lot of hard. It's hard to watch someone else take care of your baby and you don't really get to. It's hard to not be able to hold them anytime you want to. Okay, so but you do what you have to do because one of the things I've learned is I may not have got to do everything for the first 125 days, but when he came home, I held that baby all the time. And I am so close to my son and I adore him. They were like, when you go home, you're just going to sit and watch him sleep. You guys, I still go into my son's room and I will sit there and watch him sleep and just be so thankful for where he is and how well he's doing. So yes, I will absolutely go and watch him sleep. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure other people do too. But I'm also thankful for during our time with our sick child, we had so much support. In Oklahoma, you love people by bringing them a Sonic beverage. My father-in-law would drop one on my porch all the time after my son came home, and he'd be like, "I left you a Coke on a vanilla Coke on your porch," and I'd be like, "Yay!" Because I didn't get to go places with my son. When he did get to come home, he had so many lung issues that I didn't get to take him shopping. I didn't get to go run errands and do the normal things. germs could kill him. And so he didn't get to go out, especially flu, cold, RSV season. Like, oh my gosh, no. And it's so weird to me because I would see people out with their baby and I'd be like, oh my gosh, they got their baby out. They should not have their baby out. That's so unsafe. And my husband would have to remind me, Terry, their baby's not like our baby. Because I will still do this today. And they're like, they have a normal, healthy, full-term baby. Like they can take their baby out. And I'm like, okay. But we could not. And it was a few years before we could, but that's a whole other story. But I'm thankful for the NICU. I'm thankful for how they taught me to take care of my son. I'm thankful for some support through the hard days and the good days. And I'm thankful I've gotten to be that support for other people. In fact, the NICU still asks if they can give my name and number to people, and they absolutely can. And they tell these people what an amazing family we are, which is awesome. Like, how, thank you. Thank you for thinking of us like that. Like, that makes me feel so good. But even as our NICU experience continued, our son's three biggest challenges were lungs, lungs, lungs. Like lungs all the time. And I remember when he finally got to move into a nasal cannula. So he got off all the little things. And when he got a nasal cannula, you could see his face. Oh my gosh, it was so great to see his little face. He already had so much personality. Um, and then when he was 2 months old, he got a crib. He got to go out of the little isolette into room air, y'all. He got a crib, which meant he could hold his temperature better and do all the things. But he was also getting kind of big, so then he ended up with a big crib, which meant he had toys and blankets and all the things. So he had all this stuff. But there were times he went back on the CPAP machine, and then he would go back on the high flow cannula. So, it's kind of a back and forth. But the best day was when the neonatologist told me he's my baby and I know what's best for him and I can hold him anytime I want to. So there were so many benefits to that open crib and room air and that nasal cannula. Oh my gosh, thank you for the nasal cannula because it means I don't have to have help picking my baby up and I can pick him up and hold him. And I did. And other people got to come and see him and hold him too. So that was pretty awesome. Now, at some point, they decided it was time to let him have a bottle, and we learned that he had reflux because he threw that back up. But I, again, have a lot of things to be thankful for with that bottle. Um, it would wear him out, like to the point he couldn't do hands-on. I didn't get to hold him because he was exhausted. Like it just wore him out. Um, and we found out I told one of the nurses one day before I left, I was like, something's not right. I was like, I don't want him to have a bottle. Something is not right. And I also remember telling them at some point, you cannot hear him. He makes no noise. And I came in one day and one of the nurses that we love, she was like, Terry, I think he's aspirating. And I was like, oh, okay. And I said, I told you something wasn't right. Well, bottles kind of had to stop, and the testing that he needed done and the doctor that he needed to see was at a different hospital. And he could not get privileges where we were because I guess the system was updating and changing, and he would have to go through like an 8-hour class to come there. So instead, my son was what they call neoflighted, which just really means he took an ambulance because we're not far enough away to have to neoflight to another NICU. And I am going to tell you again how much I love Mercy and how thankful I am that that's where our doctor made sure we had our son. Because the other NICU is not family oriented. They did not care if I took care of my son. In fact, they went out of their way to do things with him when I would walk out. I was there all the time. But if I would leave to go eat or something, that is when they chose to give him a bath or whatever. And we had finally reached a point where I got to help with those things, so I did not like that. Also, every time I came in, he was desatting, which means his oxygen's low, or he was upset. I didn't like that. It was not a good experience. We did meet some great people, which I told them they needed to go to Mercy, and the doctor was phenomenal. We had also been very much warned about his immune system and germs, and a nurse decided to roll him through the hospital with no covering. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm like, you need to cover him up. And so she did to accommodate me. So it really wasn't a good experience, but he was there, and he ended up finding out he was aspirating. In fact, he was aspirating everything, which brings us back to being more thankful because he did not have fluid in his lungs, which he could have based on having those bottles and the fact that he should not have had those. But hey, we went there and we found out. So I remember one of our friends, the ones that stayed with us, their daughter had to get a feeding tube. And I was like, it's okay. You do what you got to do. Like, she's going to be fine. Nobody will have to know that she has it. I understood their point far more when I found out my son was getting one. And then I thought, man, I would have changed what I said to them, which all the things I said were true, but I understood how they felt in that moment because my son looked like every other child. He was just premature. Having the feeding tube, he doesn't look like every other child. He's different, and that's okay. But it was kind of a big deal, and so he had to have that surgery. And my husband was not off. I don't know that we knew in advance when the surgery would be because let's be real, we're in a hospital. They do things on their schedule, and so and of course my husband's also saving time off for when our son comes home because I'm going to need him. And so I remember my son going into surgery and I was alone and I did not want to be alone. And everyone's at work. And I called my mom and I'd been trying to get a hold of her, but she doesn't always answer her phone. So when I got a hold of her, she's like, I didn't know that you wanted me there. I was like, yes, I don't want to be alone. So my mom came and of course she brought me a Sonic drink because that's what we do, right? And so she stayed with me and sat with me while my son went through that surgery. And he had a feeding tube until he was almost 6. He was in kindergarten when he still had it. And I remember he passed the swallow test right before he turned a year old. So I'm thinking, yeah, he passed. We don't need this anymore. No, that just means you start feeding therapy. But babies have to learn to suck, swallow, breathe. And that is hard. Like, we all take it for granted, but children like my son do not because it is challenging. And so he started feeding therapy. And again, I thought he would just start eating, y'all. Now, it took a while. And then he has to be able to maintain nutrition for a while before they can take it out. But there are also benefits to having it because I didn't have to worry about giving him medication. It can go through the little tube. Um, he had a very significant surgery when he was 4, which was a game changer for him. And we could not take it out until he had that surgery. But anyway, as you can see, it took a while to get there, but yes, he had a fundo and a feeding tube put in. The fundoplasia is different because my son has never thrown up since he's had that. He's 12 and he still hasn't thrown up, which is a baby with reflux not being able to throw up. That is so hard to watch because he's like gagging and miserable. So those were some hard times. And you're not supposed to take any of the feed back out of the tube, but I'm not even going to kid you. I told his doctors there were a couple times I did. It was bad. I mean, it affects him breathing. It affected so much of how he's doing. So mostly I did not, but there were a couple times. And then there are times that feeding tube comes out. And mom, I would say I had to do surgery because I would have to get it put back in. Or if it had been out longer than I could put it back in. We had to take him to the emergency room for that. So that's super fun. But that's after he came home. So kind of going ahead a little bit. But thankfully, after he had that surgery, we did get to go back to Mercy. And it was like going back to family. Um, in fact, we left stuff there, his stuff, because we knew he was going back. And then after he had that surgery, we finally got to start talking about him going home. Like, if he had not had that surgery, who knows when he would have gone home because he couldn't maintain nutrition. So that's kind of a big deal for babies, right? So came time for him to do his seatbelt test. So they put him in a seatbelt to make sure they do well in the seatbelt. We didn't have a seatbelt because I had returned his stroller set that I bought. He was coming home on a feeding tube, and two different monitors. So a heart monitor, a lung monitor, I don't even remember, but monitors galore. So I decided I needed something different, and we ended up getting a tandem stroller, which is what you would have for multiples, but I had it to hold all his stuff. And he was coming home on oxygen. So I needed that to hold everything. So he had a giant stroller to hold all his stuff. But then we got to do our room in. So they were like, you're going to room in for like 2 or 3 days. And we're like, okay, which I'm glad because there were times that we had questions. And so we got to room in and then we got to go home and then come back to get him the next day. And that was so exciting and also terrifying. While we were at the NICU, my mom came and scrubbed our house. Yay, thank you, mom. And my aunt took his going home outfit and ironed it because I had washed it. And when I washed it, it got all kinds of wrinkled. And so my aunt took the time to iron that. And then a photographer came, and of course, they're like, you can get free photos done. Well, by the time she was done, they were not free because I bought everything. And so that was really cool. Um, and then it was time to go home. So after all the ups, all the downs, all the surgeries, I didn't even tell you all about all the surgeries because, there's a lot. But the one thing you need to know about the NICU is just it's a lot of two steps back and one step forward. And then my son has that one surgery that kind of changes everything. And we finally get to start talking about going home. And he went with home health care. He went home with a feeding tube. He went home on oxygen. They have to be down to a liter before they can go home. So he made it down to a liter. And yeah, we got to go home. It was amazing. But it was also the most terrifying day of my life because these people trusted us to take this micro-sized baby home, except for he was a normal size by this time. I believe the day he went home, he was 9 pounds, which was big for him. He started so tiny. And getting him home was the most terrifying thing ever because when we got here, I went to pump because, that's what you do. And the Apria guy came and switched him from the portable oxygen to oxygen at our house. And when he did, our son turned blue. It took too long to get the oxygen. It wasn't ready. And that was terrifying. I called the NICU because I was ready to load him in the car and take him back. And they were like, what did you do? And I told them, I said, I upped his oxygen and all the thing. And they said, Terry, y'all know what you're doing. You did everything that we would have done. He's in good hands. You're going to do great. And so obviously he made it to 14, so we obviously figured some stuff out. But if you know someone who has a child in the NICU, pray for them. And it's hard. But faith, oh my gosh, you guys, without faith, there's nothing that I could do. There were so many times I couldn't take care of my son, but I prayed and God got me through. But there were so many other people praying. There are probably people praying for my son that I don't even know. As he got older, I took him one time to a doctor's office, and he went with me, and they're like, actually, he wasn't with me. I went to urgent care, and the girl was like, "You're Brick's mom," and I was like, "Who are you? And how do you know who my child is?" Right? And she was friends with my niece, and she had prayed for my son, so she knew who he was, and I was like, "Yes, I am." And so anyway, just be nice, be loving and supportive because as much as it sucks for you as a family or friend, think about the parent that's going through that. But if you're a parent and people are saying the wrong things to you, remember they're scared too. Um, you're their child or you're their sister, brother, and I don't know, whatever, cousin. And they're scared for you too because you're going through some hard times. So just think of that. But anyway, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you know anyone that would benefit from it, be sure to send it to them. And I will see you again where we'll hear somebody else's story because I think you've heard plenty of mine. So have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you again soon.